All right, so here we go with another episode of Coffee with the Founder. It's a little late tonight, so I just got my water. So let's just say drinks with the founder. Along with that, though, we still got an outstanding guest here with us today, a true friend, a true colleague, a true brother, in fact, Mark Forte. Mark, we're doing these coffee talks trying to introduce the people in our network and our WPC family to one another, the work they do, the communities they live in. And so we really want to thank you for joining us, and let's get right into it, man. Who are you and what do you do?
All right, well, my name is Mark Forte. As I mentioned before, I work for LA County Department of Probation, Education Services. So what I do on a daily basis is work with incarcerated youth, providing them with a college education. They can earn units to get their AA degree, and then even when they're released, go ahead and get their bachelor's degree. So we realize that education is a key to freedom, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, so, well, it's nice to know that there's education in incarceration.
Yes, sir.
So can you give us a sense of the profile of the young incarcerated youth that you're working with?
The majority of the youth that we're working with are urban poor, the discarded, the undereducated, the underidentified in terms of their real educational need. But a lot of the youth have a high degree of trauma. We have mental health professionals that work with them, but in many cases, those that the media may criminalize are the ones who have been criminalized themselves. Not saying that their actions that landed them incarcerated are violent free or not heinous. Those crimes did occur. The crimes happened to them before they committed the crimes. The crimes of low education resources, the crimes of a lack of after-school funding for programming. I mean, you know, the Crip gang itself started because they weren't allowed to be a part of the Boy Scouts in the local community here in LA in the late 1950s and early 60s. So they went to alternative methods for recreation. The same is true today in 2020 for our youth. The majority of our youth are low-income Black and brown boys. Very rarely are they from privileged communities or backgrounds. And when they are, there's been some excessive trauma that's been delivered to their lives.
So, Mark, I want to ask you about how you maintain, how you sustain in working in an environment where you're dealing with young people with such a high need in reference to crimes, trauma, harm that's been done to them. And now you're trying to bring them to another level. I want to ask you about that. But before that, give us a sense of what your day looks like in reference to teaching and learning with the youth that you're working with.
Well, it's like any other classroom. The only real difference is that when you report to work, you know, you're going through a systems of literal checks, somewhat like going to the airport to make sure you're not bringing in anything that would harm the youth, and also that they're not asking you to bring in things that we call contraband, to make sure that security is in place for you and for the youth. But in terms of service delivery and teaching, it's the same. For me, it's identical to the work I've been doing for the last 30 years in education at the various levels. Authenticity is key. Look at the human being, not at the surface, but dig underneath to find out what the authentic needs of the human being before you are.
Yeah. So, Mark, talk to me about what it's like day to day, the wear and tear on you, really, as an educator, as a role model, as a mentor, working with some young people who, like I said, like you said, who may have a high need in reference to things done to them, as well as the education that you're trying to provide to them. Does it wear and tear on you, and how do you take care of yourself day to day?
Well, I think that's key. I think self-care is important. I try my best to put on literally music that will give me a calm and peace after my day, and on the way to work, the same thing. So I disassociate any frustration that may be outside of work with work. And then also, you don't personalize the story. You understand that the person you're working with is what's in front of you. You can't fix all that brought them there, but you can help them so when they're not there, they'll have tools to survive.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, the research that we often hear about incarceration speaks
Yes, sir.
to Black and brown kids, kids of color, in greater numbers in
Yes,
these institutions. Is that what you're seeing?
absolutely. Reflective of that data, that's what we see in real time, yes. But that goes back to policing in local communities and who profiles as criminal and who profiles as so-called innocent. That's all privilege, right? The privilege of walking in and out of the store without being followed, or driving a nice car without being suspected, or even going to the 100 level seats in a stadium and not being asked to re-identify yourself.
Mm.
Or, as you may very well know, flying in first class and being asked to identify who you are and how you could possibly have seat 1A.
Yeah, yeah.
If you can relate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel that experience for real. What I want
Yes,
to ask you about, because you've been in education, particularly the higher ed arena,
yes, sir.
I want to ask you, when you're in the classroom with these young incarcerated youth, how different educationally, intellectually are they from your young people when you were working in the higher ed arena? Is there a big gap there, or are these kids just like an experience away from being in the college arena? Give us a sense of the intelligence of these young youth you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a full spectrum of kids. The youth I work with, there's some youth that are incarcerated that I've worked with that may have a third grade reading level, but yet there are others who are SAT away from college admission.
Mm.
And some have been recruited by local colleges and universities and would have done quite well had there not been some sort of, intervention with the local law enforcement.
Yeah. So your job day to day, your career over the years, uh, you find
Yes.
yourself in a high school classroom talking to young people about the future, the possibilities, what can go right, what can go wrong. What's your message
Yeah.
to young people today? If you're in a classroom full of young people, what's your message to them?
Well, having taught high school, having taught middle school, having taught college, and now working with folks that are incarcerated, the message remains the same. You have to believe in yourself, but at the same time, create resources. You may not think of the resources when you're younger, but look up for those mentors. Look for those connections. Look for people that look like you who are successful, because more times than not, they're open to helping you, but you have to be open to receive help. And a lot of us want to do it on our own, but none of us can be successful by ourselves.
Yeah.
That would be the main message to our youth. There are resources, grab those resources, speak to those mentors, take that advice, talk to your peers, the peers that are a couple years ahead of you that made it. Everyone hasn't failed. That older uncle may bore you to death, but he may actually save your life.
Yeah. So, Mark, how did you get here? Did you grow up thinking this is what I want to do? Give us a sense of how you got to this position where you are now.
I think in terms of, I've always wanted to advocate for communities of color, Black community, brown kids, Black kids, red kids, all kids. And I think the point for me in my life is advocacy. I've always wanted to advocate for those that didn't have. I grew up and I had. You know, I was educated in private schools all the way through college. But at the same time, I realized that my privilege in education only goes as far as the people around whom I live. So the community also should be advantaged. The greater the advantage of the community, the greater the city, the greater the state, the greater the nation. So really it's been a lifetime dedicated to making the nation itself better through communication, understanding, brother and sisterhood.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you a question about talking to the kids in the kind of schools you went to, the super privileged or the private schools where there are resources, where there's access, where
Right.
we'll probably see many of those kids making some power decisions. What would be your message to
Yes.
them? What would be your your conversation with them if you were in a room full of privileged kids who you know are going to be making big decisions in the next 20 years?
Well, I mean, most of those, most of my high school buddies are in those positions, and we do have those conversations. You know, some of what I say to them is radical because their focus is not on the people, the focus is on the profit. And they would, you know, very quickly, you know, don the clothing of the liberal and the giver. You know, we donate to this charity. You know, we went to that dance. I have friends of color. They would quickly don those clothes, but at the same time, I keep challenging them that that's not enough. You've got to make sure that if your kids have the horseback riding experience on the weekend, you make sure that the people in the community, the people who are providing those services, also have access to SAT tutoring, also have access to how to write a personal statement essay. That should be your concern as well. Your concern should be letting them know what the structures are that will allow access to higher ed, that there's money available for kids who have parents that may be a single parent household or no parent household, that access and achievement and focus and desire can pay off no matter the color of your skin or your starting point.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, this is this pandemic, bro. This thing has hit us all pretty hard. I'm wondering first, how are you doing in reference to the pandemic? And has your job changed? Like most people are feeling like they're being forced to be inside. Based on your job, what's your situation? How are you doing? And then also the kids you're working with, the community where you're living, what's your sense of how folks are doing around you?
Well, I think just to be honest with you, since I have been deemed an essential worker, I'm the only one that leaves my building every day to go to work. Everyone else is working from home. So that immediately shows a class differential, which is poignant every morning at 7 a.m., first of all. Second of all, being quote unquote essential frontline worker, we're never identified on the commercials. It's usually doctors and nurses. They forget about educators working with our incarcerated youth. The change, majority change, is having to teach with a mask on, work with kids with a mask on. That is the primary challenge. How do you connect when you just have your eyes to connect with, especially incarcerated youth? They need all of you, not some of you. So that becomes difficult, but manageable. And everyone's done a great job with the masks and working with our youth in spite of this pandemic. Also for the youth, and it's been good for us, we've created virtual visits so that we've set up the Zoom type thing. We use Microsoft Teams so that kids can visit with their families virtually. So that helps as well because in-person visits were canceled. The kids don't feel, they're not kids, the youth don't feel the pandemic as much as we do who go in and out of the facility every day. In terms of Los Angeles, you've never seen the streets clearer, freeways have never been easier, and the hills have never been greener. So there's been an environmental positive impact to LA from not having so many commuters, but at the same time, the desolation and isolation has been a personal challenge because I'm a people person. I'm a hands-on person. So not being able to integrate myself with friends and family is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Mark, what has this pandemic taught you about you? As I think we've all been asked to essentially experience some crisis that's been way beyond our control, and at least for me, I mean, it's made me reflect, made me look inside, and so I'm wondering, I mean, for you, what has this time, over this time, taught you about you?
Well, I think it really taught me what an interactive person I am. I'm a personal touch person. I like the one-on-one with people. Not having that disturbed me. Not being able to interact with even my friends that work at the grocery store. We used to give, you know how brothers give hugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can't do that. We got an elbow and all this nonsense. That's not me. I'm a people person. I enjoy that. I enjoy, greeting my sisterhood the same way with hugs and kisses on the cheek. Can't do that. Miss that. So it's caused reflection and understanding of who I really am in terms of my spirit, my level of outreach and how important that is to me, communing with others. I may not be a constant churchgoer, but the idea to get together in a congregation to sing or to socialize, not having that interrupted my flow spiritually. And so what I did was do more writing and reflecting, and I'm working on a wellness program to talk about, since I do so much work with trauma, how to address the trauma that we all have and the essence and the beauty of who we are and bringing that to light. So that's been kind of something I'm working on in birth, how to help people find their essence and focus on that. And if you're glowing in your essence and I'm in mine, we have a greater reality together, a greater community, a greater nation, a greater state.
Yeah. Now, you think the COVID-19, the pandemic, quarantine has impacted the incarcerated, particularly the youth, in a way that could have an impact on how they are in the future, or even, the future of the prison industrial complex? I mean, I don't feel like we're hearing anything about what's going on in reference to that area. And so having some
Right.
contact, what's your sense of what's happening and what's the future going to look like?
Well, I can't get too specific on some of those questions there, but I can say that early release programs have changed the complexion of the community. Also, policing has changed in who they're arresting. And if they're arresting you, they're releasing you, not keeping you in jail because of COVID. So that changes the regular individual who's on the street. So some who would have been incarcerated will not be. If you had charges, perhaps, that were lighter, you may be released sooner than you would have been without COVID-19. We don't know how that's turned out yet because it's too soon to have any real research. But we do know that the populations have declined in our local prisons, definitely. Beyond that, I can't really say much, but it's been an interesting process to watch. But more so, what happens to the workers of color and the working class in Los Angeles? What happens to small business owners? They talk about that, but not what's happening to the employees. Those are more than likely the parents of the incarcerated. And their ability to survive is at stake. The stimulus check was what, $1,200 payment, but they still have rent and food to pay for families of 2, 4, or even 6. So that becomes a real challenge for the community. Loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of opportunity on top of a life that's already lost opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Um, uh, I was gonna ask you to talk a little bit more about your writing, your creative spark. Can you just share with us a little bit more about uh, where are the areas that you like to focus on when you're writing, and what have you done lately?
Yes, I'm on medium.com at Mark Forte. So if you look up Mark Forte on medium.com, you've got me there, probably over 200 different pieces. I write a nonfiction. I write about just life experience. Some of it is cultural, but most of it's reflective on what I've seen or what I feel will resonate with people. For me, the idea of privilege is so obvious, I don't really talk about it. I will talk about some of the things that have been produced because of it, but I don't specifically address it in that way and in a generic way. But I think you'll understand the complexities within my writings, that some are just, lighthearted poetry, and then others are commentary on the day-to-day. There are pieces on music, there are pieces on film, on literature, on individuals that have had great impact, and some are self-reflective, hidden pieces about myself. But
Yeah.
medium.com, and I'm also on Instagram, and we're coming to you with the Mark Forte experience. But right now we have the Mark Forte Project on Instagram, which is various statements by me, again, about wellness and about focusing on the true power of who you are. Because I believe we still have untapped potential. Even good brothers like Dr. Eddie Moore, he's done so much, but he can do even more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I always appreciate that challenge coming from you in such a loving way as well. That's what I like. You challenge in
Sure.
a way that is true community, and I appreciate that, bro. I just want you to know that. Let me ask you about Ahmaud
Yes.
Arbery and Breonna Taylor,
Yeah.
some current events, and how has that
Yeah.
landed on you, and have you written about that? And then also with the youth that you're working with, are they in tune? Do they get an opportunity to learn about some of those kinds of current events, and has it impacted them in any way?
Well, they're completely aware of the current events, but for them, for them have deemed who is the enemy and who is the friend. So it's not a non-starter for them. For us, however, and for me in particular, the Arbery case hits home because are there activities that are white only? Is jogging a white only activity? We've joked about it in comedy sketches. Are we allowed to do what white people do? Jog? We can't shop. We get shot at Kmart. Now we can't jog in communities. What else can we not do? We can't drive, right? We get killed when we're driving. Damn near can't fly without being taken out of the line. And if you make it through the line, if we try to sit in business or first, we're asked to double identify ourselves. So it really fits in coming up on 55 years of experience in America. This is what not having privilege feels like. So if you work out, you better work out at home or in a gym. If you drive, you better drive a modest vehicle, but make sure you stay in the right neighborhood. And if you're out of the right neighborhood, make sure you're there for service delivery or have identifying papers or carry a badge to identify yourself as someone who has access to privilege. Not quite sure how that works. Because it works sometimes, Doesn't work other times. So the so the cases, whether they be in Georgia, Mississippi, or LA or New York, never surprise me. For example, you can sunbathe in New York on the Lower West Side, right by the docks, and the New York Police Department will give you face masks and allow you to sunbathe in peace. But if you go to Brownsville and you leave your tenement, we're going to have a problem. So what's the difference? What is the difference? Privilege is the difference.
Yeah.
So if I'm privileged, I can enjoy the sea air of New York Harbor. But if I'm not, I got to stay in Brownsville inside the brick tenement at 20 more degrees warmth than you are enjoying just what, a mile or two to the west. So that's an issue. So the Matt Marbury case only hits me as yet another in 54 years of life experience.
Yeah, you mentioned movies and music, and of course being out in LA. I just feel like there was a time when incidents like this were happening in America's streets. There were protests, there were recognition or acknowledgement coming from Hollywood or movie stars or musicians, rappers even. What's your sense of the role of people who are in these super privileged positions, particularly like Hollywood, since that's where you are, LA? But maybe I'm missing it because I'm in Wisconsin. Is there any kind of
Right. No.
outpouring of outrage coming from LA privilege?
No, I mean, there really isn't. You know, and I've been in LA since what, 84. So I, witnessed the Rodney King and even my old classmate, John Singleton, being out there in the middle of the protest and documenting that. And the times have changed. We have an elite group. I respect them, but an elite group of Black producers, directors, and writers busting their butt to make sure their projects come to life through Netflix or through the studio system, and that's all they can do right now, or that's all they choose to do right now. You do have people like Danny Glover from Lethal Weapon who legitimately will get out there and lend his voice to protest. So we can't ignore those strong voices. But as a class of Hollywood class of all colors, it just isn't happening. I mean, you have Sean Penn doing a lot of good work around human rights and others, but in terms of a movement, not happening.
Yeah.
It just is not happening. I think social media has isolated and insulated people to the point where COVID-19 pandemic lockdown was facilitated because people became so individualized anyway, they don't miss community. If you don't have community, you don't miss community. If you haven't been born in community, you don't miss community. Some of us, those of us on the screen, you and I, we didn't exist without community. So when you took it away, it hurt us more psychologically, right? If I can't see you and fellowship with you, whether it's just on Sunday, or I pass by and give you a hug real quick and say, brother, keep going, we miss out on that. But everyone in everyone's community didn't have that. So when you took it away, no big deal. You can't go to sporting events. Okay, we won't go. You can't go to church. Okay, we won't go. You can't go to the movies. Okay, we won't go. You can't go to restaurants and sit down. Okay, we won't go. But people born in the understanding that human life depends upon the sharing of spirit, we got affected the most.
Yeah, yeah. So, bro, what are you anticipating over these next 25 years as a result of COVID-19, the pandemic? Does this have the ability to affect the next 25 years of life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The way in which we interact as people, as human beings, has been directly challenged by COVID-19. The way in which we listen to authoritarian government has been challenged. The idea that we have a leader who won't even participate in what has been enacted by leadership, that's an issue. So even this rush back to reopen flies in the face of real researchers and doctors who spent their lives looking at pandemic, have spent their lives looking at social manner and social mannerisms. So it will be affected. I'm very concerned about that. We're already, as a species, becoming more separated and isolated. Now we have class structures that have become even more ingrained in separation. Because if you lived in New York City, in Manhattan, you got to leave and go to Connecticut and go to your country homes and your summer homes to avoid the pandemic. But what happened to the poor folks? Not saying the Bronx, I spent a lot of time there growing up. What happens to them? Yeah. They didn't get to escape. They had to work through it. So now what do we do with a society where people consciously or unconsciously understand they are the haves and the have-nots? I think the have-nots got a real message that you really have not. You have not the privilege of universal health care. You have not the privilege of educating your children in school and catching up. What about the disparity of the kids that didn't get to go to school who are already behind? What happens to them?
Yeah.
When PS 101 opens, you still can't catch up to that privately school educated kid who during the pandemic had a mother who was a teacher or had an advanced degree who could give you art lessons and the benefits of her education. That wasn't the case if you were the have-not. So the haves and have-not, I think that's become even more punctuated during this time of separation in the pandemic. So I worry about what's going to happen to the class of people and the experience of human beings in this country. What advancements are we going to miss out on? And what technology has been put in place post-pandemic that we may not be aware of?
Yeah. Well, Mark Forte, we're going to definitely make sure people know how to find you and how to follow you. But what I want to ask you about is what are you planning over the next 10 years? What can we expect from you over this next decade? You got anything cooking, anything planned in reference to you and your work as you think about your writing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. What I have planned is, like I mentioned before, the wellness page. I want to promote the essence of who the human being is supposed to be, not the structures that tell you who they want you to be. And that will be part of a larger scope of materials and workshops that will be coming forward to work around issues of trauma that may be the result of what the privilege have done to you. It could be the result of you jogging and not being killed, but being questioned. So we want to work through that trauma. I want to teach folks how to find peace within who they are and what they've gone through. So there'll be a series of workshops. There'll be a series of meetings. We're going to do a lot of introspection. Since COVID created all this alone time, let's look at who we are alone so we can be better together.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to happen. The Mark Henry Forte experience, get ready for it. It's on its way. And the wellness is going to be succinctly delivered by yours truly.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it. And listen, bro, if there's anything the White Privilege Conference can do to support, to collaborate, you let us know. As long as we're having a party, you're invited.
Well, I thank you, Dr. Eddie Moore. It's always a privilege to see you. And I'm glad you have adopted the glasses, that I have. It's important, but we will collaborate, and we're going to grow as we haven't even thought of. I think we can do great things together, because you let people know what is. Then I want to help people understand how they can not just survive, but thrive no matter the circumstance.
Yeah.
And so I want to be about healing, comfort, and value of each person, and get us to a new level of understanding in the next 10 to 15 years.
Well, let me have a little fun with you with what I call my lightning round. I'm gonna just
All right, let's
say
give it a shot.
something or name something or ask you to choose something, and you just in 15 seconds, 30 seconds, get a chance to respond.
All right, let's go for it.
Okay, are you going with Macklemore or Sir Mix-a-Lot?
Sir Mix-a-Lot, thank you.
You going with Cardi B? You going with Cardi B or Nicki Minaj?
Nicki Minaj.
You going with Tupac or Biggie?
Biggie, you know, East Coast in the house, baby, baby.
Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix, don't even know what Hulu is.
Are you going with The Wire or New Jack City?
New Jack City, got to Ice-T, baby.
Yeah. Will Smith or Denzel?
Denzel, money earned in Mount Vernon, my hometown.
Yes,
Gotta
sir.
support Denzel.
Spike Lee or Tyler Perry?
Woo, Spike.
Kerry Washington or Viola Davis?
Kerry Washington for 100, please, Alex.
You going with Whitney or Tina Turner?
Tina Turner for 100.
Beyonce or Janet Jackson?
Janet, baby, Janet.
Steve Harvey or Richard Pryor?
Richard Pryor, live on the Sunset Strip. Can't beat that.
Justin Bieber or Justin Timberlake?
Neither.
Bro,
Can't go either way on that.
Are you going with
Oh, sir.
Are you going with NWA or Public Enemy?
Public Enemy #1. Boy.
Are you going with Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga?
I'll go with Tay-Tay.
Rambo or the Terminator?
Terminator.
Yeah, yeah. One last thing, man. If
Yes,
you are
sir.
in a lip sync championship
Yes, sir.
and you got to pick one song to sing, what's
Lip
going to
sync,
be your
okay.
song?
Woo! I'll go with Erotic City by Prince.
Boy, I like to see that. I like to see that performance right there, boy. I like to see that.
Oh, man. I've done it before.
Yes, sir.
Erotic City, come alive.
Man, bro, I miss you, man. It's good to see you, man.
My pleasure, man. Good to see you, Brother Eddie.
Let's be sure to stay in touch, man. And if we ever get back to a place where
definitely.
we can, or I can get out to LA, I'll definitely look you up, and maybe we'll find ourselves at a conference or something together. But we'll be in touch for sure, bro.
Oh, no, 100%. And look forward to sharing the information. So you'll have all my updated stuff. You have my email. And glad to participate in a virtual conference like this. Fantastic. Always support the conference, you know that, and support Eddie more. From the days of T-shirts at the hotel, I got you.
Man, I'm sending you love, bro, from Wisconsin, man. Appreciate
man, you. Hey, I got you, man. I got you. Send it back. Send it back to you.
All right, bro. Be safe.
Swear to God, we got this, man. Yes, sir.
Peace.
No, you too. Love and peace, brother.
Love, man. Love.
I'll email you out. I love, man.